Hello, my name is Claire Orcutt, and I will be doing an industry analysis of the airlines industry. In this presentation, I will also be analyzing the strategy and performance of Alaska Airlines as well as Southwest Airlines. So starting with a definition of the industry, the official title of this industry is the Scheduled Air Passenger Transportation Industry. The North American Industry Classification System code is 481111, and this essentially encompasses all forms of commercialized air transportation of both passengers and freight over regular routes and schedules. So diving into our Porter's Five Forces analysis. First, let's start with industry rivalry. Industry rivalry in the airline industry is very high, and this is primarily because it's dominated by a very select number of large companies. So think of your Delta Airlines, American Airlines, United Airlines. Those are some of the biggest competitors in this industry. And because there are such a few number of large companies, these companies are able to achieve an economies of scale since they are specializing in such large scale operations. And with this, there is going to be a very high degree of price competitiveness in the industry. So all of these airlines are trying to achieve the lowest possible ticket prices for the greatest possible value. Now, threat of new entrants in this industry, unsurprisingly, is going to be low. And this is because there are very high barriers to entry in the airline industry. So, for example, there's going to be a very large capital investment requirement to build an airline and actually operate successfully. With that, there are several stringent regulatory requirements in regards to safety, the environment, and many other regulations to operate according to the law. And with that, the threat of new entrants is also going to be low because brand loyalty is already very high with the major firms that already dominate this industry. So it's going to be very hard to penetrate the industry as a new entrant for these reasons. Now, looking at bargaining power of suppliers. So really, the three major components of supply in this industry are going to be the aircraft, jet fuel, and labor. Now, the aircraft suppliers in this industry are very limited. Namely, Airbus, Lockheed Martin, and Boeing are the three dominant aircraft suppliers, and so there are a very limited number of suppliers. Now, the demand for jet fuel is going to be very inelastic, and essentially what this means is, despite fluctuations in price, there's always going to be demand for that fuel, therefore bargaining power is going to be very low. And with that, the supply of labor is also going to be quite limited in terms of pilots, crew members, and any other employees that are needed in this industry. And this is due to a high level of training and expertise that is needed for labor in this industry. Now, looking at bargaining power of the buyer. So this is referring to the airline, this is referring to the bargaining power of the customers that are purchasing tickets. So bargaining power for customers is going to be relatively moderate, and this is due to the fact that switching costs are essentially zero. So the cost to switch from one airline versus the other is essentially nothing. And with that, with the advent of smartphones and websites and online information, it's very easy for buyers to access information for the prices of tickets. So therefore, buyers are going to be very highly aware of this information. And with that, buyers are going to be very price sensitive. So when prices are lower, buyers are going to be more willing to purchase airline tickets. And likewise, when prices are higher, there are going to be less flyers. So therefore, bargaining power of buyers is moderate. Finally, we have our substitute products. There really are essentially no substitutes for flying via an airline. So obviously you have other forms of transportation like cars, trains, even walking, but all of these modes of transportation pale in comparison to the efficiency and the degree of travel time that comes about with flying via an airline. So therefore, substitute products are low. Now let's start with comparing our SWOT analysis of Alaska versus Southwest Airlines. So starting with Alaska, Alaska has several key strengths. Namely, Alaska is well known for having a high quality of service and brand reputation, and this primarily is because of friendly staff members, punctuality in terms of on-time performance. It's got a strong loyalty program and a couple other of attributes that just really increase a positive customer experience. Furthermore, a unique quality of Alaska is that it's the number one provider of flights between Alaska and the contiguous United States. And so it really dominates primarily the Pacific Northwest region of the United States. With that, Alaska also has an alliance with oneworld. And essentially what this is it's a program where various airlines are partnered together so that you can use mileage earned in the loyalty program and exchange that with different airlines. So for instance, if I earn mileage with Alaska, I can use this with Malaysia Airlines, which is also partnered with oneworld. Now, looking at the weaknesses of Alaska, to reiterate, Alaska is primarily focused on serving the West Coast region, so it is quite limited in terms of the geographic area that it serves. Furthermore, it serves a very limited number of international flights. And with this, Alaska's biggest weakness is probably going to be safety concerns. So as you might be aware, just this past January of 2024, Alaska had a notable event in which a door flew off of one of its Boeing 737s mid-flight. And obviously this brought a lot of negative publicity to the company, so safety is definitely one of its current weaknesses that is a high priority. Now, opportunities. Like I mentioned, expanding its U.S. route network is definitely an opportunity since it currently only serves the West Coast area. And expanding internationally is another opportunity that could prove lucrative to increase its profitability. With that, Alaska does not offer any business class, which is slightly unusual for an airline to only offer commercial seating. Threats. Some of these threats are really applicable to all airlines in the industry, and that is new airline regulations that will come about that could impede operations, as well as fluctuating fuel prices, and this could definitely hamper profitability of the airline. And then another threat that we've seen become more prominent is extreme weather due to climate change that has been happening. So this is definitely a threat that could affect flights and on-time performance. Now let's look at a SWOT analysis of Southwest Airlines. Starting with our strengths, one of Southwest's most reputable attributes is its turnaround times. So Southwest achieves some of the lowest turnaround times in the industry. And what this means is that the length of duration from start to finish with a flight is going to be the lowest for Southwest, essentially saving customers the most time. With that, Southwest definitely prides itself in the quality of its service. So in terms of the friendliness of crew members, really the whole in-flight experience is going to be rated very highly at Southwest. And with that, Southwest definitely emphasizes having the lowest possible ticket fares in the industry. So this is something that Southwest definitely tries to market towards its customers as having the lowest ticket prices available. Now, Southwest does have some notable weaknesses, and that is relying on its point-to-point model. So essentially what that means is Southwest flies to various points across the country, whereas a more common model is the hub and spoke model, in which there are several hubs. For example, Delta uses this model in which the hubs fly to different spokes across the country. So essentially this just means that Southwest is slightly limited in the efficiency in its routes. With that, Southwest does offer limited in-flight services, meaning that it doesn't offer meals or other extra perks to customers. And similar to Alaska Airlines, Southwest is flies very limited international flights. Now, opportunities. Similar to Alaska Airlines, Southwest has the opportunity to expand its flights internationally and expand its U.S. route networks to service additional regions in the United States. With that, it has the opportunity to expand its in-flight services, such as adding meals and other in-flight perks. And like Alaska, it does have the opportunity to expand to offering business class seating as opposed to just commercial class seating, because this could potentially increase its profitability. Now, threats, these are also very similar to Alaska. We have the imminence of changing flight regulations, fluctuating fuel prices, extreme weather, and of course, there could be an emergence of additional low-cost carriers that could pose additional competitive pressures on the airline, Now, looking at a value chain analysis, we'll start with Alaska Airlines. Now, generally, you're going to see that the necessary components for operating an airline are going to be your aircraft, fuel, labor. You need your flight crew and route planning, ground services. Of course, for service, you need customer support, in-flight amenities, HR, technology development, maintenance. All of these encompass the entire operations and value created by Alaska Airlines. Now, one thing I want to highlight here is that in terms of marketing and sales, Alaska is definitely going to place an emphasis on its quality, as well as focus really on marketing to the West Coast area, because this is where it primarily serves. Now, comparing the value chain analysis to Southwest Airlines, you're going to see that it's relatively the same here. The operations are very similar in terms of starting with, boarding the customers and getting them to their destinations. However, in terms of marketing, Southwest is definitely going to place a greater emphasis on marketing its price, because Southwest really tries to offer lower prices as well as a high quality experience. Now, with this, the generic competitive strategy that I've identified for Alaska Airlines is a focus strategy, because to reiterate, it is focused on serving flights to Alaska from the West Coast. And of course, it's focused on offering the highest possible customer experience that it can. Now, comparing that to Southwest Airlines, I have identified a competitive strategy of the integrated cost leadership and differentiation strategy. And this is because, one, Southwest tries to undercut competitor prices by offering the lowest possible ticket fares. And it also differentiates itself by reducing travel times and, again, providing the best possible customer flying experience. Now, looking at our financial analysis ratios for the fiscal year of 2023, I've selected six different ratios here to compare the financial performance between these airlines. Starting with the current ratio, which measures liquidity, you can see that Southwest definitely takes the cake here, meaning that it could potentially have more liquid capital available. Now, looking at return on equity as well as return on assets, these both are profitability ratios, and we can see that Alaska definitely gets ahead in these two categories, which may signal that Alaska is doing better in terms of profitability. Debt to equity essentially measures how much debt is leveraged versus equity in financing its operations, and this is generally across the board for both Alaska and Southwest. Gross profit margin measures revenue minus cost of goods sold and then divides that by revenue. So you can see that Alaska Airlines definitely gets ahead in terms of gross profit margin, which means that it may be achieving higher profitability. And now finally, we have total shareholder return, and this measures it measures the total dividend yield as well as the buyback yield for these two companies. And you can see that in the most recent fiscal year of 2023, Southwest has performed better, which may signal that it may be a more lucrative investment opportunity for investors in terms of achieving greater returns. Now, all across the board, it does seem that Alaska Airlines is in better financial health in terms of its profitability. However, for investors, it does seem that Southwest Airlines is yielding higher returns for shareholders. Now, lastly, looking at our stock price comparison chart, You can see the S&P 500 is in green, Southwest is in red, and Alaska Airlines is in blue. Now we can see there is a pretty high degree of correlation between Southwest Airlines and Alaska Airlines. As you can see, in 2020 there was a bit of a dip in stock price performance as well as a surge going into 2021. And from 2021 until our current time, you can see there has been a gradual decline in stock price for both companies. So something that investors can take into note here is that Alaska Airlines has been performing slightly better in terms of stock price compared to Southwest Airlines. And that is all I have for you today, so thank you for listening.